Betrayal cuts deepest when delivered by those holding the keys to your sanctuary. Adrian caught his trusted housekeeper stuffing expensive groceries into her worn canvas bag, terminating her instantly. But tailing her rusty sedan into the city's darkest slums revealed a hidden truth that shattered his entire world. Perched atop the sweeping, sun-drenched hills of Bel-Air, the Langdon estate stood as a modern fortress of glass, polished stone, and cold architectural perfection. Valued at nearly $40 million, the mansion was a testament to the ruthless business acumen of its owner, Adrian Langdon. As the founder and CEO of a global logistics empire, Adrian viewed the world through the lens of efficiency, profit margins, and absolute control. His home reflected his soul, immaculate, silent, and entirely devoid of warmth. Maintaining this sprawling sanctuary required a small army of staff, but the linchpin of the household was Cynthia Hayes. A dignified black woman in her late 40s, Cynthia moved through the cavernous halls with a quiet grace and an eagle eye for detail. She had been Adrian's head housekeeper for 3 years, orchestrating the cleaning staff, managing the temperamental private chefs, and ensuring that Adrian's rigidly scheduled life ran without a single hitch. Cynthia was a woman of few words, characterized by her pressed charcoal gray uniform, her hair always pulled back into a neat, professional bun, and an aura of unshakable calm. Adrian respected her, or at least he respected her utility. In his world, loyalty was purchased with an $80,000 annual salary and comprehensive benefits. He assumed that was enough to secure her absolute fidelity. Suspicion first took root on a brisk Tuesday morning. Laurent Adrian's overly dramatic private chef burst into the dining room, while Adrian was reading the Financial Times over his morning espresso. Laurent was furious, waving a silver inventory clipboard. He complained bitterly that premium ingredients were vanishing from the walk-in refrigerators. We were not talking about a missing apple or a slice of bread. Laurent noted the absence of imported beluga caviar, organic grass-fed Wagyu beef steaks, highly specialized nutrient-dense bone broths, and oddly expensive hypoallergenic baby formula that Adrian had explicitly ordered for a recent charity gala he hosted for a children's hospital. Adrian detested theft. It was not about the financial loss the missing items amounted to a rounding error in his daily interest accounts, but rather the breach of contract. Theft was an insult to his intelligence and a violation of his meticulously curated control. Dismissing the chef with a curt nod, Adrian retreated to his private study. He locked the heavy oak door, sat behind his massive mahogany desk, and accessed the estate's state-of-the-art security system on his customized ultra-wide monitors. Selecting the hidden cameras positioned in the pantry and the kitchen's rear exit, Adrian scrubbed through the footage of the past 48 hours. High-definition video fed his growing anger. There, clearly captured in the dim glow of the refrigerator light at 2 a.m, was Cynthia. Adrian leaned closer to the screen, his jaw clenching. Cynthia stood before the open shelves, carefully packing a large, faded canvas tote bag. She was methodical. She took Tupperware containers filled with leftover gourmet meals. She took 2 sealed jars of the expensive bone broth. She took a tin of the imported infant formula. She did not look like a greedy thief rummaging for a quick payout. Her movements were precise, desperate, and hurried. She zipped the bag, looked over her shoulder, and slipped out through the staff exit. Cold fury settled in Adrian's chest. He did not feel sorrow. He felt the sharp, metallic sting of betrayal. He immediately pressed the intercom button on his desk. "Cynthia, my office." "Now." Less than 2 minutes later, a soft knock echoed through the study. Cynthia entered, her posture perfect, her expression neutral. "You asked for me, Mr. Langdon." Adrian did not offer her a seat. He simply rotated one of his massive monitors so it faced her, tapped the spacebar, and let the high-definition footage play. Cynthia's stoic facade cracked instantly. Her eyes widened, and for a fleeting second, raw panic flashed across her face. Her shoulders slumped, the impeccable posture giving way to the heavy burden of a woman caught in a devastating lie. "I demand an explanation." Adrian's voice was a low, dangerous whisper. "I pay you exceptionally well. You have access to a generous healthcare plan. Yet you creep around my home in the middle of the night, stealing thousands of dollars worth of premium provisions like a common alley rat." Cynthia swallowed hard, clasping her hands tightly in front of her to stop them from trembling. "Mr. Langdon, please. I know how it looks. I know it is inexcusable. But I swear to you, I am not selling these items. I am not taking them out of greed. There is a situation, a literal matter of life and death. I ran out of options. My savings are gone. I just needed to make sure." "Stop!" Adrian commanded, raising a single hand to silence her. "I do not care about your excuses. I do not care about your sob stories. In the business world, when an employee steals, they are not only fired, they are prosecuted. You have broken my trust, Cynthia." Tears welled in Cynthia's dark eyes, spilling over her cheeks. It was the first time Adrian had ever seen her cry. "Sir, I am begging you. If I lose this job, people will die. Innocent people. Please dock my pay. Make me work for free for a year. Just don't let them starve." "You are terminated effective immediately," Adrian said, his voice devoid of any human empathy. "Leave your keys and your security badge on this desk. You have exactly 15 minutes to pack your personal belongings and vacate the premises. If you are still on the property in 16 minutes, I will have the police escort you out in handcuffs, and I will press charges for grand larceny." Cynthia looked at him, a profound sadness replacing the panic in her eyes. It wasn't just sadness for herself. It looked almost like pity directed at him. She slowly reached into her pocket, placed the heavy ring of keys and her plastic ID badge on the polished mahogany, and walked out of the room without another word. Adrian sat in the profound silence of his office. He had executed the termination flawlessly. The threat was neutralized. Yet as he watched the monitor, replaying the footage of her packing the bag, a discordant note rang in his analytical mind. Why the baby formula? Why the bone broth? Why the soft, easily digestible foods? If a person were stealing to sell on the black market, they would take the silver, the vintage wines from his cellar, or the small electronics scattered around the house. If they were stealing to feed a typical family, they would take bulk dry goods or heavy meats. Cynthia had targeted specific, highly nutritious, easily consumable items designed for convalescence and infancy. Furthermore, she earned enough to buy regular groceries. Her desperation was specific, acute, and terrifyingly real. Curiosity, a trait that had made him a billionaire, now gnawed relentlessly at his conscience. He needed to know the end of the supply chain. He needed to know exactly who was consuming his stolen goods. Making a sudden decision, Adrian grabbed a dark trench coat and a baseball cap from his closet. He bypassed the garage housing his fleet of Bentleys and Ferraris, opting instead for a discreet tinted window Range Rover he rarely used. He pulled out of the estate gates just in time to see Cynthia's rusted blue Honda Civic sputtering down the winding road toward the city limits. Shadowing the battered vehicle felt entirely beneath a man of his immense stature. Yet Adrian could not abandon the chase. He kept a steady distance of 3 car lengths, his hands gripping the leather steering wheel as the scenery around him began to drastically shift. The manicured lawns, pristine sidewalks, and towering palm trees of Bel Air gradually gave way to congested freeways and eventually to the grim, neglected underbelly of East Los Angeles, Atmospheric conditions outside his climate-controlled cabin grew visibly thicker, tainted with smog and urban decay. Adrian watched as Cynthia's car navigated streets lined with overflowing dumpsters, graffiti-scarred brick walls, and groups of desperate-looking individuals huddled under flickering street lamps. This was a world Adrian actively avoided, a world he only saw in abstract data reports on urban poverty. Cynthia's first stop was a dilapidated corner pharmacy. Adrian parked across the street, watching intently through his tinted windows. She emerged 10 minutes later, clutching a small, flimsy plastic bag. Even from a distance, Adrian could see her counting a few meager coins before dropping them into the cup of a homeless man sitting by the door. The irony stung him. The woman he had just fired for theft was giving away her last pennies to a stranger. Driving another 3 blocks, she finally pulled into the cracked, weed-infested parking lot of a brutalist apartment complex. Structurally, the building looked as though it were slowly sinking into the concrete. Paint peeled from the walls like dead skin, and the iron railings along the exterior walkways were rusted entirely through. Adrian waited until she had disappeared into the dark stairwell before stepping out of his vehicle. He pulled his collar up against the chill, the scent of stale beer, damp rot, and boiled cabbage assaulting his senses. He moved quietly, his expensive Italian leather shoes stepping carefully over discarded needles and broken glass. Tracking her path up the concrete stairs, he arrived on the 3rd floor. The hallway was dimly lit by a single, buzzing fluorescent tube. He slowly walked down the corridor until he heard a familiar voice. It was coming from apartment 3B. The wooden door was warped, its hinges loose, preventing it from closing completely. A sliver of yellow light spilled out onto the dirty linoleum floor. Adrian positioned himself in the shadows just outside the door, holding his breath to listen. "I'm back, sweetie." Cynthia's voice drifted out, sounding exhausted, but overwhelmingly tender. Violent, rattling coughs echoed from within the room, before a weak, raspy voice replied, "Cynthia, you shouldn't have hurried. Did anyone see you?" Adrian froze. The blood drained from his face, pooling in his stomach like lead. That voice. It was frail, broken, and practically a whisper, but it struck a chord deep within his chest, a chord that had not vibrated in 5 long, bitter years. Leaning closer to the gap in the door, his heart hammered against his ribs like a trapped bird. He pressed his eye to the crack. Inside the apartment was little more than a squalid box. A single mattress lay directly on the stained carpet in the center of the room. Beside it sat a cheap, rusted space heater and a pile of threadbare blankets. Kneeling on the floor was Cynthia. She was hastily unpacking the canvas tote bag lining up the stolen Tupperware and the heavy tins of baby formula. However, Adrian's eyes bypassed the stolen goods entirely. His gaze was locked onto the mattress. Lying there, propped up against a remarkably clean pillow, was a young woman. Her face was gaunt, her cheekbones jutting out sharply beneath translucent paper-thin skin. Dark purple hollows ringed her eyes, and her once vibrant blonde hair was dull and matted with sweat. Clutched fiercely to her chest, wrapped in a faded blue towel, was a sleeping toddler, no more than 18 months old. Adrian's breath hitched a silent, agonizing gasp tearing at his throat. Charlotte. Truly it was his daughter. Charlotte Langdon. The fiercely independent, brilliant girl who had defied his absolute authority. 5 years ago, Adrian had arranged a marriage for her with the heir of a rival tech conglomerate, a union designed solely to solidify a market monopoly. Charlotte had refused, declaring she was in love with a struggling musician. In a fit of tyrannical rage, Adrian had given her an ultimatum: obey his commands, or be stripped of her trust fund, her name and her family. Charlotte had chosen the door. He had never looked for her, letting his monumental pride convince him that she would come crawling back when the real world crushed her. She never did. And now here she was, wasting away in a slum, looking like she was teetering on the very edge of death itself. "He fired me, Charlotte," Cynthia whispered, her voice breaking as she stroked the young woman's damp forehead with a cool washcloth. "Mr. Langdon caught me on the cameras. I had to leave." Charlotte let out a choked sob, clutching the baby tighter. "No. Oh God, Cynthia, no. I'm so sorry. You lost your livelihood because of me. Because of little Toby. I told you should have just left me at the free clinic. I'm dragging you down." "You hush that nonsense right now," Cynthia commanded fiercely, though heavy tears were streaming down her own face. "You listen to me, Charlotte. You are family to me. When I found you collapsed outside the shelter, I swore to God I would protect you. Your father might be a man who possesses a checkbook instead of a human heart. But I will not let you and this precious baby starve. I will clean toilets. I will scrub floors. I will do whatever it takes. We have enough specialized formula and iron-rich broth to last Toby and you a few weeks. We will survive this. He's dying, Cynthia." Charlotte wept, looking down at the innocent baby. "My husband died in that car crash, and now I'm failing our son. My body is shutting down. I can't produce milk anymore. If I didn't have the formula you brought." She broke off into another agonizing fit of coughing blood, spotting the crumpled tissue she held to her mouth. "Drink this," Cynthia urged gently, opening one of the stolen jars of expensive bone broth. "It has the nutrients you need to fight the infection. Please, Charlotte, do it for Toby." Outside the door, Adrian staggered backward, his back hitting the grime-covered wall of the hallway. The world spun violently around him. The realization of what he had done crashed over him like a suffocating tidal wave. Realizing the truth, he understood he hadn't fired a thief. He had fired the guardian angel, keeping his own flesh and blood alive. He had fired the only person in the world who cared enough to risk everything, including her freedom to feed his estranged daughter and the grandson he never knew existed. Every stolen item, the gourmet food, the expensive formula, the desperate theft, it all made sickeningly perfect sense now. Cynthia wasn't stealing from him. She was secretly redirecting his hoarded wealth to save his own discarded family. Looking down at his trembling hands, Adrian saw the hands that had casually signed the termination papers, the hands that had built an empire but destroyed a home. The cold, impenetrable fortress around his heart, maintained for 5 bitter years, fractured completely, leaving him exposed to a grief and horror so profound it threatened to stop his breathing altogether. Guilt-heavy and suffocating, pinned Adrian to the filthy hallway wall for what felt like an eternity. He listened to the fragile, wheezing breaths of his daughter and the soothing maternal murmurs of the woman he had just cast into the street. Stripped of his arrogance, Adrian was no longer a titan of industry. He was simply a failed father, confronting the catastrophic consequences of his own bruised ego. Gathering every ounce of his fractured courage, Adrian pushed the warped wooden door open. The rusted hinges let out a piercing shriek that echoed like a gunshot in the tiny, squalid room. Cynthia spun around instantly. The moment she registered Adrian standing in the doorway, her protective instincts overrode her lifelong adherence to professional deference. She vaulted to her feet, placing herself firmly between the billionaire and the mattress, grabbing a heavy iron fireplace poker, leaning against the peeling wall. Her eyes, usually pools of calm composure, blazed with a fierce, terrifying maternal fury. "Don't you take another step, mister," Langdon Cynthia warned, her voice vibrating with a dangerous edge. "You fired me. You threatened me with the police. You have no jurisdiction here. If you came to gloat or to drag me to jail, you will have to walk through me first." Adrian did not look at the iron poker. He did not look at the stolen jars of expensive bone broth scattered across the stained carpet. His tear-filled eyes were locked entirely on the skeletal figure trembling on the mattress. Charlotte pushed herself up onto her elbows, her sunken eyes widening in sheer terror. 5 years of agonizing silence hung in the stifling air between them. When she finally spoke, her voice was a ragged, broken gasp. "Dad!" "Charlotte." Adrian choked out the single word tearing at his throat. He took a hesitant step forward, dropping his expensive trench coat to the dirty floor. "My God, Charlotte. What happened to you? Get out!" Charlotte suddenly screamed a horrifying, guttural sound that tore through her frail chest. She scrambled backward against the wall, clutching the crying toddler tighter against her collarbone. "You made your choice 5 years ago. You told me I was dead to you. You don't get to come here now and judge me. Leave us alone." The exertion of screaming triggered a violent, agonizing coughing fit. Charlotte doubled over her entire body, shaking uncontrollably. As she pulled her hand away from her mouth, Adrian saw the unmistakable, terrifying crimson stain of fresh blood across her pale skin. Her eyes rolled back into her head, and she collapsed sideways onto the mattress, entirely unresponsive. Toby, sensing his mother's sudden stillness, began to wail hysterically. "Charlotte!" Cynthia shrieked, dropping the iron poker and falling to her knees beside the young woman. She pressed 2 fingers against Charlotte's neck, her face turning ashen. "Her pulse is barely there. She's burning up with a massive fever. Mr. Langdon, she is dying right in front of us." Adrian's paralysis shattered. The ruthless, hyper-efficient CEO resurrected himself, but this time the machinery of his mind was solely focused on saving a life. He ripped his bespoke phone from his pocket, bypassing standard emergency services entirely. He dialed the direct unlisted number for Dr. R.S. Harrison, the chief medical officer of the most elite private medical concierge firm in California. "Harrison, it's Adrian Langdon." He barked, his voice carrying the absolute authority of a man accustomed to moving mountains. "I need a level 1 trauma medevac team at my exact GPS location immediately. I have a female patient, late 20s, severe malnutrition, acute respiratory infection, and internal bleeding. Bring a pediatric specialist as well. If your team is not walking through this door in under 10 minutes, I will buy your medical group tomorrow just to liquidate it." Ending the call, Adrian fell to his knees on the filthy carpet directly across from Cynthia. He ignored the grime ruining his tailored suit. He reached out with trembling hands, gently lifting the wailing toddler from Charlotte's limp arms. Holding his grandson for the very first time, Adrian felt a massive, immovable lump form in his throat. The boy had Charlotte's nose, but the terrified, tear-filled eyes staring back at him were a mirror reflection of his own. "I didn't know," Adrian whispered, tears streaming freely down his weathered cheeks, dropping onto Toby's faded blue towel. "Cynthia, I swear to God I had no idea. I thought you were just—" "A common thief," Cynthia interrupted, her voice softening as she pressed a damp cloth to Charlotte's forehead. "Mr. Langdon, you see the world in spreadsheets and profit margins. You look at people and see assets or liabilities. When I found Charlotte shivering outside a soup kitchen 3 months ago, I didn't see a liability. I saw a terrified mother whose husband was killed by a drunk driver. I saw a baby who couldn't keep standard formula down. I tried to tell you earlier today in your office, but you refused to listen. You never listen." Her words were precise, unvarnished, and agonizingly true. Adrian bowed his head, resting his chin against his grandson's soft, unkempt hair. I am so sorry, Cynthia. I am so incredibly sorry. You risked your freedom, your livelihood, everything to keep my family alive when I had abandoned them. Sirens, distant at first, but rapidly growing deafening, cut through the tense silence of the apartment. Heavy boots pounded up the concrete stairwell. Within seconds, a team of 6 paramedics clad in tactical medical gear swarmed into the cramped room, carrying portable defibrillators, oxygen tanks, and a collapsible stretcher. The contrast was jarring, thousands of dollars of cutting-edge medical technology, contrasting sharply with the peeling wallpaper and rusted space heater. "Mr. Langdon," the lead paramedic asked, immediately kneeling beside Charlotte and slapping an oxygen mask over her face. "We are establishing a central line now. Her blood pressure is bottoming out. We need to move her to Cedars-Sinai immediately." Adrian stood up, holding Toby securely against his chest. He looked at the woman he had fired just hours ago. Cynthia looked utterly defeated, kneeling on the floor amidst the chaos, her hands stained with Charlotte's blood. "Cynthia," Adrian said, his voice ringing with absolute, unshakable conviction over the shouts of the medics. "Get up. You are coming with us. You are never stepping foot in this hellhole again." Monitors beeped with a steady rhythmic cadence inside the ultra-secure VIP intensive care suite of Cedars-Sinai Medical Center. The room smelled of sharp antiseptics and fresh lilies. Through the massive soundproofed windows, the glittering Los Angeles skyline stretched out a stark contrast to the grim reality they had escaped 2 weeks prior. Adrian sat in a plush armchair beside the mechanical bed, a position he had barely abandoned since the night of the rescue. He looked older, the sharp, imposing lines of his face softened by days of profound exhaustion and deep introspection. In his lap sat 2-year-old Toby, happily smashing a remarkably expensive wooden toy train against Adrian's knee. Adrian didn't flinch. He simply smiled, adjusting the boy's grip. Across the room, Cynthia sat on a comfortable sofa, reviewing a stack of legal documents. She was no longer wearing her pressed charcoal grey housekeeper uniform. Instead, she wore a tailored, elegant navy blazer and soft linen trousers, clothing that Adrian had ordered a private shopper to acquire for her. A soft rustling sound drew both of their attention. Charlotte shifted against the pristine white hospital pillows. Colour had finally returned to her cheeks, the terrifying gauntness slowly retreating, thanks to aggressive intravenous nutrition and top-tier medical care. She blinked against the morning sunlight, her eyes finding her father and her son. "He's going to leave a dent in your kneecap, Dad," Charlotte murmured, her voice weak but laced with a hint of her old fiery spirit. Adrian gently lifted Toby, placing him on the edge of Charlotte's bed. The toddler immediately scrambled up to hug his mother. "I wouldn't care if he broke my leg, Charlotte. He can do whatever he wants." Charlotte stroked her son's hair, her gaze shifting to the man who had ordered her out of his life 5 years ago. The reconciliation between them had not been cinematic or instantaneous. The first few days of Charlotte's consciousness were filled with anger, bitter tears, and painful arguments. Adrian had sat through all of it, absorbing her entirely justified rage without defending himself once. He had proven his change not with grand speeches, but with quiet, absolute devotion. "Have you signed the termination of the lease on the apartment?" Charlotte asked, looking toward Cynthia. Cynthia smiled warmly, setting the papers down. "Handled yesterday, sweetie. All your belongings have been thoroughly cleaned and moved into the east wing of the Bel Air estate, the wing right next to the new nursery." "Speaking of paperwork," Adrian said, shifting in his chair and leaning forward, his hands clasped tightly together. He looked directly at Cynthia. "There is one final matter of business we need to address." Cynthia's smile faltered slightly. Despite everything a small part of her still remembered, the cold, calculating CEO she had worked under for 3 years. "Sir, do not call me Sir, Cynthia." "Never again," Adrian insisted gently. He reached into his leather briefcase and pulled out a thick, bound portfolio, handing it across the room to her. "I have spent my entire life building monuments to my own ego. I hoarded wealth, while people my own blood, and people with hearts 10 times the size of mine, starved in the shadows. That ends today." Cynthia opened the portfolio. The bold, embossed letters on the first page read, "The Cynthia Hayes Foundation for Maternal Security." "What is this?" Cynthia breathed, scanning the dense legal text. "It is an irrevocable, charitable trust," Adrian explained, his voice thick with emotion. "Funded with an initial endowment of $100 million from my personal accounts. Its sole purpose is to locate house feed and medically support destitute mothers and children in the greater Los Angeles area. It will provide the exact things you tried to steal from me: specialized formula medical care, safe housing, and dignity." Cynthia stared at the documents, her hands trembling violently. "Adrian, this is millions of dollars. I don't know how to run a charitable empire." "You won't have to do the accounting. I will hire a battalion of lawyers and accountants for that." Adrian smiled, a genuine warm expression that completely transformed his face. "But you are the executive director. You have the final say on every single dollar spent. You are the heart of this operation, Cynthia, because you proved that you have the moral compass that I lacked. You will sit on the board of directors of my primary corporation as well. You are no longer my employee. From this day forward, you are family." Charlotte watched the exchange, tears pooling in her eyes. She reached out her frail hand, grasping her father's thick fingers. For the first time in half a decade, she squeezed his hand, and Adrian squeezed back, holding on as if his very life depended on it. "Thank you, Cynthia," Charlotte whispered across the room, "for saving us, for saving him." Cynthia wiped a tear from her cheek, closing the leather portfolio. She looked at the billionaire, the recovering daughter, and the giggling toddler playing on the hospital bed. The cold, impenetrable fortress of the Langdon family had finally been torn down, replaced by something entirely new, built on the solid, unbreakable foundation of a housekeeper's staggering compassion and a father's absolute redemption. How would you have reacted in Adrian's shoes? Sometimes, the greatest truths are found in the darkest places, and the family we abandon is saved by the strangers we overlook. If this emotional journey touched your heart, hit that like button, share this video with your loved ones, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more incredible real-life stories. Drop a comment below.